All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the IGEL Weekly Podcast, episode number 46. My name is Patrick Toner. I'm filling in for Andy Whiteside today. And I am joined by the podcast regular co-host, Sebastian Perusat and Chris Feeney. You guys want to say hello?
Chris, you first.
Hey, greetings, everybody. Looking forward to another episode with Patrick and Seb. So we got a good topic today. Looking forward to going through it.
And I would just add, happy to have Patrick here for moderating and helping us to make this podcast hopefully as successful as the others. And just wanted to say that just in case you missed it, we launched the UMS 6.10 and 11.07 firmware a few days ago. So if you didn't update until now, it might be worth to try to look at it since we integrated a lot of new features like the structure tag replacement for the custom attributes and so on. So just wanted to say, hey, beside the security topics, it would be definitely as a good thing to look at the update from my side.
Yeah, great update there, Seb, and great point, right? There's especially with all the security vulnerabilities going on, always want to be keeping up to date, more than ever. But so we're gonna get into a nice topic today, a topic that's really useful for a lot of IGEL admins that you may not be using, and as always, we want to provide as much value to you as we can. So if you have any feedback, you have any topics, how do we get, requests for topics in, Seb? Or is that something we can do through the IGEL community?
Oh, yes, definitely. So if you didn't join until now, just in case, so igelcommunity.com would be the URL to join us on Slack and chatting with worldwide your IGEL customers, partners, and distributors. And just to answer what Patrick asked for, yes. So basically what we are doing is as soon as the topic is coming up in the IGEL community and we are seeing a kind of recurrence, questions coming in quite often, we are trying to cover that in a Tech-Tip Tuesday video. And that's obviously what we are trying to cover then in the XenTegra podcast on the IGEL community podcast side. So for the moment, the community is asking for a topic and we are trying to cover it. So just teasing, the next one might be the device encryption piece, where you are able to make a pre-boot authentication on your IGEL endpoint on your UD Pocket. So that might be the next one we'll record and maybe speak about that in 2 weeks.
Very good, very good. And this is the thing, right? This is the nice thing about the IGEL community is, it's very, it's designed to be organic and, to talk to other people, your peers in the industry and ask people like Sebastian, who, is an expert in IGEL, who can, you could send a question in, he does these nice videos, and then on the podcast, we talk about them and, kind of talk through them. So, with that, the one we're going to be focusing on today, this was an article written back in February, believe written by you, Seb. Yep, written by Seb, and it's going to be covering a topic that, again, I don't think a lot of people are using, and that is scheduled tasks. In the IGEL UMS, it's called jobs, so we're going to talk kind of through that, and Seb made a nice video. He made a nice video here, just kind of walking through it, seeing him do it in the UMS. There's all kinds of different options. So let's just kick it off. I'll go ahead and share out this webpage.
Perfect.
Kind of play the video. We can kind of talk through it as it goes.
Lovely. So there was one thing I just want to say at the introduction, because it's something which is a little bit misleading in the IGEL ecosystem. When we speak about scheduled jobs, or the topic of today, we're speaking about specific tasks that you want to execute in direction of an endpoint. But we have also a second part, which is called administrative tasks, which we already covered, if I'm right, in another podcast. So there are two absolute different parts of the UMS. The jobs we're talking today, is related to endpoints directly and can be executed without being an administrator. And then we have a second part, which is everything which is related to, let's say, backups, assigning profiles to a view, exporting specific informations in a specific format, sending out scheduled task emails, et cetera, et cetera. And that's something which is related to UMS administration, administrative tasks. So we're not covering that one today, but really just the standard jobs, what you might already have seen on your side, or when we speak about the Wacom LAN feature or the update itself, because that's where all the power of that feature is coming up.
Great. Can you guys see my screen okay here?
Hold on. Yes, in there. Perfect.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and play this, hit the mute button. But let's kind of talk through this, right? So
yep.
What are some of the things, I mean, you mentioned a few of them, what are some of the things, if an IGEL administrator is listening to this, what are some of the things that they'd want to do, what they'd want to leverage jobs for? And what are some of the main, most popular reasons you want to do that?
I would say when we come back to the beginning of the podcast, we discussed already, I would say the main purpose of the job tasks, updates. So let's imagine that you have a 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 seat UMS. Obviously, you could send out an update immediately, or you could also say send an update on shutdown. That's something that you can do as a context menu and saying right click and send that comment out. No question. But then if you want to repeat that, if you want to do that to devices which are maybe not online when you send out that comment, and all the different automation that you would like to use on an update task is not possible by just sending out a comment. That's where the jobs are taking place. So if you want to think about tasks that should happen on a recurrent, on a scheduled time frame, or if you want to leverage the boot time in specific conditions for your endpoints, because the customer or the end user is complaining, don't get me wrong, that the endpoint is taking too long to boot. I mean, it's less than a minute in most cases, so I don't feel it pretty slow, but in some cases it might already be something which cause some frustration. So that's something also where you could say, hey, why not waking up all my devices to specific time sets during the day? So let's imagine you're working for a bank where every employee is coming in at, I don't know, 7, 7:30, 8 in the morning, and the device should already be started until the login mask. That's something they can then do easily by using the jobs. So coming back to your question, Patrick, jobs are really powerful painkiller for all the administrators, where you can send out without having the need to watch them every minute, updates and comment to the end customer, to the end user.
All right, and shout out to the Quebec listeners there. Assuming they're listening in English. We want to have Michael Berman on the next one. I think he's bilingual, but so that's a good point, right? You might have users in different regions. A lot of IGEL customers are global, right? They might have help desk in a different country, different time zone. You can obviously create different jobs, and then how would you assign them, Seb? You would assign them. Let's say you had things separated by directory. So are you saying that's how you would recommend doing that? You would apply the job to the different directory based on location? That's
a really, really good question. I would always respond that it depends from your architecture and from the wishes of your administrators. You could definitely just say, I have a comment and I want to send it out to all devices inside of a directory. That's the easiest way, because you don't have to think about any kind of supplementary restrictions or filters. So that's something, short answer is yes. That's definitely one way, and maybe already the most used way. But at the same time, if you think on an update process, you might have some devices inside of that folder, which might be, I know it's a little bit exaggerated, but from your CTO or CMO, and you don't want to push out the update because you know that he is having an extremely important meeting that day, and you don't want to get an update push just before he's leaving his office. So that's the reason why we have some additional filters to the comments we're sending out. So depending on what we want to do, like update, shutdown, reboot, update, whatever you like, you can, and that's something I will cover in the video just a little bit later on. It's assigning the jobs to a view, and that's where all the magic can happen, because a view is a dynamic filter. That's my definition for a view. And the view is, if you didn't have the chance to create one in the UMS, just views, right click and create a new view. Then you can say, show me all devices which are not having the expected firmware, and beneath a specific folder, and maybe having, I know it doesn't make sense, but having 2 monitors attached, or maybe having a specific flash drive installed, because you know that the update you want to push out is quite big, and that's what we are dealing with on a daily basis. You don't want to push that on 2 GB flash DOMs, but only on 4 GB DOMs. That's where the directory logic is reaching out his limits. But on views, you can say, hey, create as many filters as you like and combine them, and then saying, hey, I just want to use the jobs on that base, because let's imagine that we stay on the firmware update. We have devices on 11.04 and we want to go to 11.06. We want to go a direct path to the not latest, but more or less latest firmware. And if you want to do that, we could say, send out that comment every morning, just in case. I mean, it doesn't mean a lot of network load, but then the UMS is sending out the comment to the endpoints. It might be worth a try to say, create a view and saying, send it out only to devices which are not on 11.06, which made the network even less important. And that's where I must say the views in combination with the jobs are extremely powerful if used in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it comes down to automation, right? You know, automating away the mundane day-to-day tasks, which, you know, are not as common when you're using IGEL as if you were, for example, managing SCCM or some other Windows management. You're going to be a little more involved. IGEL is not quite as involved. You know, not even close really, but, you know, like one of the ones is we're looking through the list here, you know, you have a few options. You have update on boot, different times you can push the update. Then you have some other ones like reboot schedule. You know, I don't know about you guys. You know, we've both been, I guess all three of us have been around IGEL for a little while. I've seen customers who, you know, devices that haven't rebooted in months, you know, still working fine. And, you know, so it's good to have that reboot schedule. You don't need to reboot as often as you would Windows, being, you know, the nature of the operating system. But, you know, what about you guys? Have you seen that in your experience? You know, customers leveraging that for reboots? And what do you guys, what's your recommendation? Well, you know, if someone's listening to this, what's your take on how often people should be doing, you know, automated reboots in their environment?
Chris, would you like to jump in, or should I take over? As you wish.
Go ahead.
The reboot job is, from my personal opinion, something which is important, but not over the job itself. I would tell you what I'm trying to explain to customers that I had to cover the last years when it came to 24/7 production lines or whatever. Sending out a reboot to a specific time when it's just a normal standard office workplace is great, no question. You do that at 11 o'clock in the evening, all good, or 2 in the morning. But if you think about, I want to reboot the device when it becomes idle, that's where I would say the job execution method is coming to an end. And that's where the conditional command based on the screensaver is reaching the next level of doing an automated reboot. But coming back to your question, I'm definitely saying that customers who are working in such kind of environments should at least have a post-session command which reboot the device or shut down the device after the session is closed. So I'm not using the job itself such often for reboots, but more, let's say, other workarounds like the conditional command and the post-session command.
You know what, and that's a great point, Seb, you know, because, and this is one that, you know, Chris, you've obviously worked in healthcare, formerly with Imprivata. Actually, we worked together. We mentioned that in the last podcast. You know, you have certain industries, healthcare. Seb, you mentioned, you know, you might have a facility that's running 24 hours that has shift workers, where this may not be a fit, right? Where you don't want to do a scheduled reboot based on time. I think it's probably worth, maybe for another episode, going through that other scenario where you're talking about the conditional reboot, you know, leveraging something like the IGEL screensaver. But let's, you know, just in layman's terms, if you need that device on 24/7, it's critical. This may not be the right method. Is that an accurate statement?
Absolutely, to 100%. I
mean,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris. I don't know if you had something there. Sorry, come off mute.
No, I just was just listening to the conversation here. I do think, you know, the industry and the situation does require some thought. I was on a call with a partner last week. They have a manufacturing facility and they literally have it set up so they can only absorb certain downtimes during the year. And that gives them very little wiggle room for when they can do updates or reboots or whatever, because they've got a production line running. I mean, the nice thing is IGEL just keeps running like the Energizer Bunny for them. But when they do need to do an update, it definitely needs to be a very much scheduled situation. I don't know if they're doing it manually or a scheduled job, but it's one of these things where they just can't randomly reboot whenever they want to. So they have to get it figured out. And certainly if they can schedule it and plan it out, it's certainly doable to just automate the whole process and hopefully sleep well at night.
Yeah, and so really, guys, if you're listening, that's what we're saying here. Listen, this scheduled job is a great feature, but if you're in one of those categories, where you have healthcare, 24/7 facility, this is probably not what you want to do. However, if that's not you, you're in an office scenario, where people leave for the day, those devices are just sitting there. You can automate things like forcing them to shut down, doing an update when they shut down, forcing them to reboot. So that's where this would be a fit. And I think, guys, for the next one, maybe we walk through another scenario, because that's a totally different can of worms. But it's very useful, especially if you're in that other camp. So let's talk through. So we're kind of watching it go through here. So now let's say we've selected what we want to do, whether we want to update on boot, whether we want to send a reboot, a shutdown request. Let's talk through some of the other ways that we can optimize this.
Sorry, go for it.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, let me rewind the video a little bit back to this menu. So you have some other things. You have execution time. You have the start date. How many threads? Let's talk through these options a little bit.
Sure. So first of all, if you think of a scheduled job, because that's something that came out on our enterprise German customer, who, just telling you just a short story, who replicated his installation from the prod to a test environment. So what he did is basically he made a backup of his database and all the settings, imported that on another server, all good. What he didn't do is he didn't separate the network. So the new UMS could contact the endpoints. Obviously, the other way around wasn't possible because another IP address, et cetera, et cetera. Even the certificate was another one. But what he did is he tested some jobs. And just one thing I want to mention, sending out a job is always sending out a command from the UMS to the endpoint. And if the MAC address is still there, like an example, and the network communication is still available, then you might hit a quite interesting situation where the endpoint will get the command, even if it's not related to the test installation. So just in case, be aware that a job is always sent out and is not sent out in a way where the device will get it as soon as it reboots if it wasn't on it. It's just a live statement. So that's the reason why, coming back to the execution time and start date, obviously you say it will happen one time on Sunday morning at 4 o'clock. That's great. But some devices might not be reachable to that moment. And that's the reason why you can say, hey, why not repeating that in a regular amount of time? And that's something we'll cover a bit later on. So coming to the threads itself, if you send out a specific command like a shutdown to your whole UMS endpoints, you might send out that command to 10,000, 5,000 devices. And that's something which might also hit a specific limitation inside of our UMS communication method. That's the reason why we can say, don't do that for 10,000 devices at one time, because the UMS might get unresponsive or less responsive than before. So that's the reason why we are limiting the amount of threads related to the specific job. That's something which is already quite helpful because if you do not know how to use that feature, I wouldn't care about the thread amount, but that's what we are already teaching you. Obviously, you can increase that amount. There is no big deal by doing that. Just be aware that you will need more requirements on your server regarding CPU and RAM and memory. So just be aware that if you want to move that thread to a higher amount, that you might need more resources.
So it's really coming down to concurrent devices doing the same things like boot storming, trying to avoid that. If you've rebooted 10,000 devices in your environment and they're all trying to hit the UMS at the same time, that could be a problem, obviously. So if you set it to 100, it's only going to be 100 at a time. Is that how I understand that, Seb?
Yeah.
Very good.
Exactly. So that's the only recommendation really that I have in that specific moment. So even if you think of the different comment that we are sending out, so we already spoke about update, we spoke about reboot, but before going to the next step, just let me mention one last thing. We have situations where we assign configurations or new settings, not now, because we do not want to interrupt the user, which might get a graphical user interface restart or a session restart. We do that on next reboot. And there, coming back to your example, Patrick, where the device will stay up for 1 month, the device will never get this new setting. So one approach is to do a reboot, but there is also another one. So there is just another setting that you can send out, which is called setting UMS to device. So you're pushing really the last known configuration from your database to the endpoint. And that's something that you could do on a Sunday morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, like an example, without having to reboot the device. Just one thing that came to my mind, because that's something that you could do, coming to the next part of the job window on a specific repeating method. So saying that it will happen every Sunday. So that's something that we are covering in the tutorial, just explaining that the job isn't meant to happen only one time, but can also be repeated quite often. And my opinion is, if you have such kind of jobs, watch them by using the log function, coming a little bit later on, but also set a maximum duration, because if you have a job which takes 30 minutes, it cannot be right, in my opinion. I mean, there is specific use cases where it might be right, but in my opinion, there's something wrong. So that's the reason why I'm always setting, not always, but in most cases, setting out a cancel job execution of a max duration time of 20 minutes. If it's not a really huge amount of devices that I'm looking at.
And Seb, with those log results, where does the admin view them? They view them in the UMS console?
You mean the job execution logs?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Very good point. So if you didn't deactivate the log results checkbox, which is activated by default, every execution of the job and the respawn of the device is getting logged in the database of the UMS. So you have, as soon as you saved your job, that the job run for the first time, let's say on Sunday morning, you come back to the office on Monday morning, and then you have in your UMS your job, and beside that, you have the execution results. And these execution results are holding a history of every job run, and for every job run, the results of the device. So you would see if the device wasn't reachable, like an example. And then you can try to work around by creating a view, or let's say, or create a new schedule for that specific kind of devices.
Great. And that in itself could be a whole other topic for a different podcast, right? All the right. UMS logging features. There's some powerful stuff you can do in there, from, hey, seeing who made changes at what time, which user account in UMS did it. It's really powerful stuff. But okay, yeah. Don't want to derail there. So let's say you have your job created. You want to do an update. You want to do something like you mentioned, UMS to settings. Probably the most used option in the UMS as an admin, right? You're always right-clicking and doing that when you're troubleshooting.
Yeah. You
set your execution time. I think we got a little head on the video here. Let me rewind a bit. Yeah. Then once you hit next on that first screen, you have a few other options here. And it's going to be around scheduling. So you can select your, the time you want to do it. You mentioned, Seb, doing it, how often you want to do it. Do you want to do it once? Do you want to do it, every week on the same day? Kind of walk us through that a little bit, and just some important high-level things people might want to consider here.
Right. So we already covered the candidate job execution itself. So just in case, I just want to re-mention it. If your job is taking too long, you want to cancel it. And that's something that you can do on that bottom part of the page. What we are doing on the job execution repeating, so happening on a recurrent task, is that let's imagine that you want to wake up all your devices on your network. And that's something you do not want to do it just one time, because you want to do it every morning, so every one day during weekdays. That's something where the repeat job feature is pretty helpful, because let's imagine that the wake up job didn't went through your network, so the magic packet didn't reach the network interface from your endpoints, which is, at least from the European point of view, happening every 90% of all cases, because the network department wasn't really kind to open that box of worms. So what we are using there is the wake on proxy, another topic, another tutorial, but just saying that if you want to send up a wake up job to the endpoints, just maybe don't do that just maybe one time, do that every day. And that's where the repeating function of the job is taking all the places.
Great. So once you have that set, obviously here we're seeing, it's being applied to, now you mentioned applying it to a view. There's other options. You could apply it to a directory. You can apply it directly to a device. That's probably a good first step for testing. Just applying directly to a device. Are there any other options? Those are the three main options there. Once you have the job created.
Yeah, that's right. Besides the views and the directories, there is no other, let's say, graphical user interface way to send out a regular comment to the endpoint. What we're not covering there is the endpoint side, since sending out a job from the UMS is, like I said, just sending out a comment from the UMS to the endpoint. But you could also do something like send me something from the endpoint to the UMS. So that would be a local scheduled task by using cron or systemd timers. Another topic, another tutorial again, just saying we're really focusing only on the UMS. So there, that's right. We have views and we have the directories devices.
Very good. And then once it's obviously set up here, we're seeing it's getting a firmware update. And we mentioned, like, you always want to test with these, right? I mean, that's obviously best practice. But once you create that job, schedule it for one device, make sure it works correctly. And then from there, you can then take that to the next level, apply it to the larger directory or the view that's giving you a specific amount of devices. And now here, where I think we're seeing, in the UMS, you can check, if you click on the job itself, you can see, which is a really great feature, hey, which devices have gotten it, what are the results? Just a really nice feature. I could tell you, back when I used to manage SCCM, this was a lot more, yes, it has a nice interface there too, where you can kind of look through and say, okay, which devices didn't get this, which ones failed. You're probably not going to get quite as many failures generally with IGEL with this, but it's just nice to be able to view it and have that peace of mind.
Absolutely. Just in case, I want to mention for our listeners, since I said all the logs are based and stored in the UMS itself, in the database. And if you have a job which is reaching out to 10,000 devices every morning, you might a little bit mess up your database. And that's what I'm covering in the next step, and just explaining, hey, might be a good idea to have an administrative task which deletes all the log execution results older than 3 weeks, like an example, because you don't want to look 3 weeks ago if your device got a wake up signal. So just in case, I just wanted to mention it, the job execution is in the database. And if you are scared to mess it up, just use the administrative task to delete them after a specific amount of time.
Very good. And then what's your take on, let's say you have a scheduled job, and I'm just kind of throwing one out there. Would you recommend creating new as you go or editing as you go? Like, let's say it's an update schedule, right? And you need to change it. Is that all, is the admin fine just right clicking, editing that job and changing the feature, changing the attributes there for a different time? Or would you recommend creating a new job and getting rid of the old one?
If I think about the historical approach of the UMS, I would definitely say that deleting and creating a new one might be my best bet, just for one reason. Most of our listeners and our UMS administrators are, like I do, lazy people. You create a job, you leave it running, and it works. That's the way, that's the reason why I'm happy to work for IGEL. That's the way IGEL is working. You click on it, you create the job, and it's executed. But at the same time, you will maybe have forgotten to create the cleanup task for the database. You will have some devices or maybe some jobs which are just there for testing, and they will stay there forever, maybe just deactivated, but still there. Create a new one, delete the old one, and it will just give you a little bit better feeling about what you are doing. Because sometimes, even if the job tool itself is not such complicated, you might have some views which are not updated anymore because they are old or outdated, or you might use old directories. And if you just edit and change it every time, you might miss something new directories. That's something which will not happen if you create the job itself from the beginning on, because there you're focused on really just adding the new stuff.
I think if I understood that correctly, I think the UMS management might be making us a little lazier based on, you're making me think introspectively right now, being one of the lazy people you mentioned. But yeah, that's a great point, right? It's all about, maintenance, making sure, views are great, but if you don't touch it for 2 years, it might not be giving you the accurate information. And sometimes, it's kind of the blessing and the curse of UMS because it's so easy and it works so well. It's a lot of times it's set it and forget it. And then next thing you know, you're like, wow, I don't even know what's in that view, but I've been relying on it.
I agree.
So very good. So that in a nutshell is jobs, right? Just to recap, it's really designed for devices that, have downtime. Number one, that's got to be definitely a prerequisite. Devices that are, they're going to be, there's going to be a period of time where there's no one at that device. The office is closed or whatever. And then from there, you can push these scheduled automated tasks that just make your life easier. All right. Any closing thoughts on that? Anything we missed, Chris, Seb?
With you first.
No, I'm sorry. I've been very quiet here. I've had traveling and the maid was outside knocking. And so I'm just trying to be polite and not bring in some ambient noise. No, I mean, honestly, this is sort of the advanced stuff that, you really kind of want to roll your hands up and kind of get into it. And I haven't had a chance to, just in my role, to be able to do that much. So I'm just listening. I don't really have any thing to add at this point, other than thank you, Seb, for taking the time to put the video tutorial together, and appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure. For everybody listening, again, anything you want to hear on this podcast, any topics or anything like that, please reach out. IGEL community is a great place to do it. All three of us are on the IGEL community. Sebastian is extremely active on the IGEL community. And we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear what are the topics that you're thinking like, hey, how do I do this? How there's a workflow that I know other customers are doing. Let's walk through it so we can all see it. We've talked about a few of them today, doing the automated reboots for devices in those high use areas, healthcare, 24/7 facilities. So that's one that we'll kind of table and talk about and hopefully present in the next one or down the road. But we definitely want to hear your thoughts and get your feedback so we can, give you topics that are useful to you. And with that said, guys, it's been a pleasure. I think we can kind of close here. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great week, and we will talk to you on the next one.
And thank you, Patrick, for holding the session. It was a pleasure.
You got it. You got it.
Take care.
Have a good one. All right, bye-bye.